5 members of the crew stand at the door with bated breath. It had been 2 months since the crash. Not only had no help arrived, but supplies were becoming low. In their desperation, they agreed to break the biggest rule their company had set, and raided the stock they were meant to deliver. They had no idea what was going to be beyond this door, but they hoped for the best. Food, water, medicine. Perhaps with whatever it was, they could even use it to jerry-rig a fix for the ship. Maybe they could finally get home. The recently appointed captain unlocked the door, revealing rows upon rows of boxes, only to find that every single one was full of mouthwash. This is a little warning. I am overcoming a cold, so sorry if my voice sounds a little disgusting. Also, here's a fun little challenge. Take a shot of mouthwash every time I say mouthwash in this video. But actually, don't do that. That is a really bad idea. Mouthwashing is a brand new 2024 indie psychological horror game. The plot follows the 5 members of the crew aboard the Tulpar, a spaceship designed by shipping company Pony Express. Partway through the ship's voyage, everything goes wrong when the captain of the ship goes completely crazy and purposefully crashes it into an asteroid. We then follow the characters' experiences of being lost in space in a non-linear fashion, both before and after the crash. And it genuinely is amazing and is a mastercraft at horror and character-driven stories. If you haven't played the game, I highly recommend you do so, as the story is worth it to see. And you should play before watching this video, as I am about to spoil the end, and it's best to play blind. At the end of my playthrough, or more accurately at the end of me watching Markiplier play through the game, I was left with a sad, empty feeling in my stomach, as all good tragedies should leave. But I was also left with a single question on my mind. Why mouthwash? I mean, yes, obviously, I know the game is called Mouthwashing because mouthwash is literally everywhere throughout the plot of it. The characters drink mouthwash. They walk through piles of empty bottles of mouthwash. The ship's stock is only full of rows and rows and rows of mouthwash. But why did the game devs decide it was going to be mouthwash? The stock of the ship could have been anything. Toothbrushes, floss, Hatsune Miku figures. But it's mouthwash. I know in my everyday life I tend to the curtains are blue pieces of media, but the mouthwash is so everywhere in the game that I think there has to be an answer. And I think to get there, I kind of have to go on a bit of a tangent. The thing about mouthwashing is, like I said, it's a very character-focused story. It makes it a very good story, don't get me wrong, but because of that, the audience tends to focus heavily on the character's role in the tragedy. Yes, obviously, Jimmy is a shitty man who does a lot of really, really, really bad things. Every single crew member's death can be directly traced back to Jimmy's actions and decisions, and that isn't even the worst of what Jimmy does. And yes, obviously, Curly isn't exactly perfect either. His inaction in even trying to fix the problems with the crew, due to his desperate need to remain as constantly neutral as possible, enables and emboldens Jimmy to do even worse things. However, I think that there is someone else here who is also at fault for causing this tragedy to happen. Someone who has been almost completely ignored. That being Pony Express. The company's failures can be seen all throughout the entirety of this game. Anya points one out herself.
Hey, why do you think Pony Express put a lock on the medical room door but not in the sleeping quarters?
I suppose for the same reason they put a lock on the cockpit. Safety.
Presumably, Curly's thought process in this scene is, what if you need help in your room? We need to be able to access you. But I think if they actually cared about safety, they would put locks on the bedroom, especially considering that Anya is the only woman on this crew, which is a scary situation to be in. Assuming that Pony Express was the ones who put together the crew themselves, that is also their fault and a bad decision. They should have run better screenings before trapping all these people with Jimmy. But they decide to make a woman be trapped in a space she cannot get out of for a year with 4 other men and not even give her a lock on the door. Because of that failure of design, Jimmy is allowed to take advantage of Anya. The first incident that happens that causes the rest of the game to play out the way it does. My little theory here, my game theory, that's really awful. My little theory, my game theory, if you will, is that this was an attempt to save money. Putting locks on a door requires additional parts, which cost money, so they're not going to put it on any room that they don't think it's necessary, such as the bedrooms. However, they put a lock on the med bay to discourage people from taking drugs, because again, drugs cost money. Let's not forget also when they did put together the crew, they added one final intern to the team at the last minute. But they did not add another cryopod in the room, most likely because, again, that would cost money, as well as delay the delivery, also costing them money. But these are necessary emergency supplies designed to save lives. Imagine if the crew got in a situation where the ship crashed, but the pods survived. They would have to choose someone to stay behind. How fair is that? Plus, if we assume they didn't add another cryopod for their extra person, who's to say if they didn't also add enough food, water, or medicine for that extra person? But of course, in this story, most of the pods don't survive, and that is because of the other poorly designed safety devices. See, if the ship crashes, it has a system in place that automatically sets off foam that seals the cracks in the ship. That's a good thing, right? No one will get sucked out into space, and the ship can remain intact. Well, yes, but there's 2 problems with it. Problem A is that it goes off unnecessarily. In the game, one of the characters, Daisuke, accidentally sets some off when attempting to fix a part of the ship. He doesn't create a new hole in the ship, the foam just sets off, trapping Daisuke in it. Now, in this scene, he is fine, but imagine a scenario where this happens and the foam just so happens to cover other parts of the person, like, I don't know, say their mouth and nose and all of the parts that person needs to breathe. But I'm sure that would never happen. The second issue is that when the foam does actually work, it works, a little too well. Covering everything in the ship the crew could use to survive. Those pods I mentioned earlier, 3 out of 4 of them destroyed by foam. A box in the hallway full of extra medical supplies, covered by foam. The device that allows them to get food and water, covered by foam. This one is especially ridiculous as it isn't even close to any wall. Why is the foam spraying here? This exact situation actually forces one of the crew members to cut up the foam, risking the seal breaking and everyone losing oxygen, or worse, getting sucked out into space. This leads me to believe that either the people who designed this ship did not have the time to come up with a way to protect these devices from the foam, or the foam was so poorly and cheaply implemented that it didn't matter if there was a design for it or not. The poor design of the ship leads me to believe, despite having no evidence for it, that the breaking vent that eventually kills Daisuke is not the fault of an accident or human error or even age, but is the result of cheap parts. We also never see any kind of distress signal, the only way to contact someone being a shitty fax machine that might only work one way and is also in the front of the ship, the part most likely to take damage. Just another way that the ship is cheaply designed and the emergency materials on board are not actually prepped to help save the crew. Not only does the company's penny-pinching ways lead to poor design of the ship, it leads to an insane level of control over their employees' lives. This is the code scanner. It's a device that only the captain has, allowing him to see codes and unlock certain items. This is very useful for keeping things away from the crew, like, say, locking the door of the inventory they're meant to deliver, which does make sense, but is also insulting that you would assume your crew is going to steal from you. But it's also used to meticulously control the lives of the crew. The only weapon on board, the gun, is locked up behind this, which, again, does make sense, but does also mean the crew has no way to protect themselves without the code breaker. Similarly, the axe is also locked up behind code, which, it's a weapon and safety, sure, but the axe is also the only thing that can break the foam. Say that scenario I mentioned earlier, where the person is covered with foam, actually does happen. You don't have time to go find the captain, find a code, get the axe, and break the person out. Or even worse, what if that person is the captain, and the code scanner is hidden in the foam? What are you supposed to do then? And maybe they just didn't think about that, but when you're designing a place for people to live like this, you have to keep these sort of scenarios in mind. It's especially ridiculous considering the axe is a tool that can be used to save someone's life, but is locked away. Meanwhile, the key to turn off the autopilot is just sitting in an unlocked locker. No code behind that one. Alright. But at least there is some logic behind locking up the axe. But you know what has no logic to lock up? Sugar. The company locks up sugar and discourages the crew members from using it. Even the one time they do use it before the crash to make cake, the crew is only allowed to use one packet of the stuff, thus creating a cake that is canonically mediocre at best. What is the point, exactly, of keeping sugar away from the crew? Other than, of course, to save money. What do you think, they're gonna eat too much of it? Screw you! They're in space! Let them eat what they want! Speaking of cake, does anyone else think it's crazy that they're only allowed to have one communal birthday party because the company doesn't want to spend money on party supplies or cake, or allow the crew to take time away from their jobs? Obviously, this isn't a life or death threatening thing, but it is crazy that the company policy has such a level of control over their lives that they are not even allowed to celebrate their own birthday. And if anyone happens to step out of line or mess up, even if that mess up is the company's fault, they get their pay docked. That's one of the first things that happens in the game, even before we crash the ship. And that fear of docking pay is just another thing that controls the crew's lives. They're stranded in the middle of nowhere, possibly about to die a very slow and painful death. And Swansea does not want to raid the stock because he doesn't want to get his pay docked. Everywhere you look in this game, the company's obsession with money causes so many problems, be it big or small. They don't actually care about the crew's safety whatsoever. They put no lock on the door of the crew members' bedrooms, but they made sure their stock was hidden behind a secret code you need a special device to see. Yes, the captain is at fault for not doing his job. Jimmy is at fault for causing this fucking tragedy to happen and doing all these terrible things. But just because people do terrible things does not mean we can allow the company to get away with neglect as well. It is just as much Pony Express's fault, as they failed in their responsibility for protecting the crew just to save a few bucks. And what the fuck does any of that have to do with Mouthwash? Admittedly, I might have gotten a little off topic here, but I promise you that this point is going to come back around. I have a question for you. What exactly does mouthwash do? It cleans your teeth and kills the germs behind bad breath. But here's the thing. While yes, it is true that mouthwash can help, it isn't a replacement for brushing your teeth. See, originally, mouthwash was something that was designed to be used as an anesthetic, something useful, a medicine. But it didn't work as well as intended. As a result, they didn't know what to do with this rather weak anesthetic. The solution? Marketing.
The Martins have been happily married for a year, but something's gone wrong. Halitosis, bad breath, is no help to a happy home. Why depend on toothpaste? The most common cause of bad breath is germs in the mouth. So Betsy left Listerine by the basin where Bob would see it. You see, toothpastes aren't antiseptic, so they can't kill germs the way Listerine does. By millions. That's why Listerine stops bad breath 4 times better than any toothpaste. Nothing wrong with the Martins' marriage that Listerine couldn't fix.
Make something trivial a medical problem. Now, again, obviously, Listerine didn't invent bad breath. Bad breath is real, but it's a very minor problem that for the most part can be covered up with a mint or just by brushing your teeth. Listerine took this minor problem and turned it into a medical condition with its own fancy name, halitosis. See, bad breath is minor, but if we make everyone believe they have halitosis, the medical condition, and shame them for it, they'll be more likely to buy our product to fix it. And it worked. They took this product people had absolutely no reason to spend their money on, as it is almost entirely useless and does not do as much as advertised, and turned it into something everyone felt like they needed to buy, simply through the power of marketing. In a weird way, because of that, mouthwash is kind of the perfect symbol for corporate greed. But that's in the real world. When you transfer this idea over to the world of mouthwashing, it becomes even worse. Because the mouthwash in mouthwashing is high in sugar content, an ingredient that was likely added to help taste and sell more product. But it is also an ingredient that takes a mostly useless product and turns it entirely useless. It can't be used as an anesthetic, and it would probably make your teeth dirtier than before. They may as well be carrying nothing. And I think that's it. Not only does Pony Express's lack of safety or concern for its passengers directly cause this tragedy to happen, but the saddest part is, this ship should have never been sent out in the first place, because there's no purpose behind it other than greed. This tragedy happened for nothing. If Pony Express wasn't greedy, this ship would have proper safety precautions and not be built with cheap materials. If Pony Express wasn't greedy, the ship should have been carrying food, or water, or medicine, or anything more useful, something to help people, that could have helped the crew. If Pony Express wasn't greedy, the crew would still be alive. But instead, they spent all this time and money and energy on a product that is, for the most part, entirely unnecessary. They traded the lives of 5 people for mouthwash, for money. There is one final thing that I want to say about mouthwash. Most of the time, bad breath is caused by something trivial, something that can be easily taken care of by brushing your teeth. But there are some serious cases where bad breath is being caused by something dangerous, some underlying problem, such as cavities. In this instance, mouthwash still isn't helpful. Using it cannot fix the underlying problem. Instead, it only masks the smell, making you unaware that this problem is growing even worse than before. Making you unaware until it's too late.